Alrighty, it is 12 o'clock on the dot, so let's get started. Welcome everyone to Collegial Conversations with Diana Clark. Today's guest is Debbie Connolly for the topic, When You Can't Be Cloned, Parenting Children with Competing Needs. Diana, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brandy. I love the idea of thinking that parents might be able to be cloned because even in the simplest of families, right, Debbie? The tribe of how many? And you have grown through this. I have watched you shine through this. I've known Debbie for a decade at least now, and she has been through many, many twists and turns on her parenting journey, and yet she still glows. So welcome, Debbie.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
you being
much.
here.
It's an honor, honestly.
Thank you. Thank you. So talk to us a little bit about your conceptions or preconceptions when you decided to become a mother. What did you think motherhood was going to look like?
Oh, that is a fabulous question. I think I thought motherhood would be hugs, Play-Doh, and making cake.
Really?
I thought it was going to be very, very, very easy. I love children, and I thought I had this, no problem.
Really?
Mhm.
Wow. I remember leaving the hospital with my newborn, and I was in my 40s thinking it is sheer negligence to send home this baby with me. I mean, I really felt like that. It was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm in awe of anybody who thought they could do a good job on that one. That's amazing. Yeah. So how quickly did you find out that motherhood was more complicated than you had initially thought? How old were your kids? I mean, you had them in pretty
So
rapid
I
succession.
have 4 children within 6 years. So the first, I did have that feeling when my mom left, after the first 2 weeks, exactly what you just said.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, now I'm alone.
Yep.
So my preconceived notions and then my actuality was completely different. So I completely relate to you on the way that you felt. So I think it changed when my first 2 are 17 months apart, and then my third came along 2 years later, and then my fourth. And the third was the time when I didn't have enough hands to cross the street, and one was flipping out of the carriage. And from there, it got more complicated.
Chaos.
Chaos, constant chaos.
Were you the kind of parent who could ask for help?
I think it was my greatest strength and my greatest weakness. I could ask for help, and I think sometimes it got me into trouble, honestly, down the road when one of my sons had a very, very serious addiction issue. So sometimes your best qualities and your worst qualities are completely intermeshed, and that was definitely me.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about your oldest son's addiction. Yeah.
So it started when he was 15. He came back from a private school, wanted to join with kind of the cool hockey kids, and they were great kids making poor decisions, and my son joined that group. And then from there, it was started with pot smoking, and it got out of control within a year and a half, and we were skyrocketing toward, we didn't know where we were going, but I knew we were going somewhere, and it wasn't going to be good.
So you saw the red flags. It wasn't just that he was smoking pot. It was that he was changing, right?
It was defiance, it was smoking, it was stealing, it was there was bullying behavior. There was feelings of, how can I be in this house because I don't know what to do and I don't know how to protect myself and my other three. So there were all of these feelings that were really, I didn't know what to do with all those feelings other than going back to what you said, can I ask for help? I started reaching out like crazy. I was like that octopus in My Friend the Octopus.
Tell me about that. Yeah, for those who
So
haven't seen it. Yeah.
I was so, my goal was, I have to save this child. And at all expenses, my octopus legs or arms or both were in every direction you can possibly imagine. And, you know, it went for a while until there was a time when I said to my husband, and I said to myself previously, in an honest, very heartfelt way, what are we waiting for? And I will never forget where I was standing. I was at my back door. It was a glorious day, the way it is today. And I called my husband at work and I said, what are we waiting for? And he said, what are you talking about? Right. And I said, are we waiting for him to overdose? Are we waiting for him to get into a car accident? Are we waiting for him to kill someone else? Are we waiting for more destruction in this family of 6? And then I said, if you can't do something, I will. And at that point, I knew, and it was based on one of my son's best friend that was just found underneath one of the bridges in New York City, homeless. And that was his best friend. I said, something has got to change. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's a lot to take in, but that's truly what happened.
So how long, and I'm going to ask this for a reason, parents, you know, seem to go through, it seems to me, a couple of years before they get to what are we waiting for? How long was it for you?
It was just shy of 2 years.
That is sort of the trajectory I have witnessed over and over. And people in their families get there earlier, but parents seem to take a couple of years. Yeah.
And I wanted to share because I think it's really important. So I have 2 girls and 2 boys. The lineup is girl, boy, boy, girl. And so we have bookends of girls on both ends. And it's interesting that you say that the families may get there earlier, or even I might qualify, siblings may get there earlier. So I've been doing a lot of thinking in kind of anticipating this conversation. And I've been thinking a lot about my girls. And I think possibly they got there way before I got there, or my husband got there, or my son got there. So it's very curious that you say that, because I think possibly everybody was saying the same question, and I've never thought about it until today. I think my younger son and my 2 girls might have been saying, without them knowing it, internally in their head, what are you waiting for, Dad? What are you waiting for, Mom?
And were they angry at you? Sometimes what happens in that situation when the kids get there before the parents, right, because siblings not only have clearer vision sometimes, but they have more information sometimes. Parents do not have, it violates the sibling code. Kids keep secrets from their parents. They know more than the parents in many, many situations.
I totally agree. I think, so your question is, were they angry? I think that all 3 of my other children were scared, anxious, and furious. And I think to date, there is still a lot of those feelings that I have confirmed with them, that I get it. I don't blame you. And as a parent, for all those mothers out there and all those fathers and all of those caretakers of children, when you have someone that is sick in your family, and I would say this is what I felt your goal is to save that child. Beyond anything else, your goal is to save. And that's what I thought I had to do at all costs.
Mhm. Mhm. That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I mean, this might sound like an awful expression, but there's a tyranny of the fragile, right? That person needs me.
Yeah.
Everybody else will be okay. They don't need me in this moment the same way the
Perfect.
fragile does.
That is perfect. And yet, retrospectively, I'm like, oh my gosh, they needed me. But as the topic of this conversation, there was only one of me. It was impossible.
Mhm.
So I had to go toward what I thought was the fire that I had to put out. Otherwise, the entire house was going to burn down.
Burn down. That's right. That's right. So 2 years, you finally say, what are you waiting for? What happened next?
So I had lined up everything with an educational consultant. Of course, I didn't have one educational consultant. I had 3.
Because you were the octopus seeking out the
Because I was the octopus, and I thought I've got to cover all my bases because I need it to be just right.
Right.
So I finally honed in. I signed papers for the educational consultant. I hired a transport service to come into our house. It was 3 days after the day that I was standing at the back door when I asked the question, what are we waiting for? So the night before this was going to happen, I walked up to the 3rd floor and I called my brother, who had been my confidant, my rock, my everything. And I said, oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? Is this crazy? Am I crazy? And he said, no way.
Mhm.
So I'm getting a bit.
Yeah, no way. Doing nothing in that situation. It almost, Debbie, in my experience, it almost didn't matter what exactly you did as long as he knew you really struggled over what you did.
Right.
Right.
So the next step was, I said, okay, thank you, confirmed, check. And the next morning at 5 a.m., 2 350-pound men came through our front door and quietly as men that weight can do, went upstairs and quietly said to my son, you don't need anything. You're coming with us. Before that, I went up and said, we love you. We'll see you soon. I walked back down the stairs, and within 4 minutes, my son left to go to the wilderness.
Mhm. Mhm. And how long did he stay out in the woods?
So he did brilliantly well.
Yeah.
He stayed, I want to say it was, I don't remember. I want to say 9-10 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we had to join, and we did a whole weekend of being together and listening and just being a part of what the process was. And the next part is, where do we go from here?
Yeah. And did your other kids come with you to the family piece, or was that not inclusive of them?
So for one of them, there were so many pieces to this. The HYDE program was a huge part of our family work, and they had to go to that.
Mhm.
So that, I thought that was really great, but for a lot of it, I would say bits and pieces, not all of it, but some of it for sure. So they had a glimpse of what was happening, but I think for a long time, and I don't know if this is true with you, because it's such a hard thing for people to understand that nobody chooses to be this way. Nobody sets out to say, I'm going to destroy a family, or I'm going to make my sisters and brothers nervous about being in our kitchen, or that's not the way it goes.
No, no.
And I look back over what was happening with my son at that time beyond addiction. And you and I have talked a little bit about this, of what happened within his development. Did he feel loved? And by whom did he feel loved by?
Mhm.
And was he bullied?
Mhm.
We know he was. When he went to private school, we know he was. He was the kid in the family that was always 10 pounds overweight. If he wasn't that, he was a bit more. So to be that in this family must have been a bit difficult.
And there may have been other things you don't know about in school, we don't
Right.
know.
Right. We don't know.
We don't know.
Right.
Gabor Mate, who wrote In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, basically says that all addiction or severe substance use disorders begin as pain medication. And so as we roll back, we have to look a little bit at what was that pain? Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think the other thing I started to say, and I kind of interrupted myself, was I think addiction is so hard to understand when you really feel kind of in your heart that, well, why can't you get it together? And why do you do this?
I know.
And how could you in a family that is supposed to be all together? How can you disrupt this at such great lengths?
Mhm.
And the answer for me, because, and I'm on a continuum and I'm nowhere near at the end, but I have lived a lot. And I feel like they truly didn't choose to be like that. And if anybody out there can hear that loud and clear, I think that is the message that I tried so hard and continue to try, is nobody wants to be addicted and bully and be that person. I don't believe that with all my heart and soul. I just won't.
What
Do you
about that
agree?
would be an appealing goal, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. And I do agree with you. Nobody chooses that path. I think that sometimes we are put on a path and we can either make ourselves better people as a result of that path,
Right.
or lesser.
I
And
totally agree.
one of the things I love about the idea of recovery, whether that's 12-step recovery or smart recovery or therapeutic recovery or marathon running recovery, whatever that program of recovery that works for somebody, it is always a program of betterment
I
in
love that.
some way. And there aren't that many diseases where the cure is betterment.
That is, I've never heard that. I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
So some of my favorite people on this planet are the people who walked, the sometimes what they might call the knucklehead path, 12, 13, the knuckleheads,
Right.
and have wound up being the soul and heart of organizations and families and other things.
Mhm.
So there is recovery, and I know you know that. Tell me a little bit about your daughters. How did they do?
So that's such a great question. I think well, right now they're 26 and 33 today. My daughter is, so that.
Happy birthday, Mama. Yeah.
So, I think they have struggled, and I think they're on that continuum, honestly, right now, in kind of a brilliant way, because they're beginning, I feel, to be honest with themselves as to how they feel. So for me, I'm, as you can see, with the way that I cry and speak and try to get points across both to myself and to anyone that will listen, I feel like they are beginning to get to know who they are for the first time. So that's pretty brilliant.
That's very exciting. And you are right. All of the research talks about when people are vulnerable and authentic and able to reveal who they are.
Right. It's hard.
It's really hard.
And I think it's easier and harder to keep, when you're in a group and you see people like this, the body language of keep everything tight, keep everything closed, keep everything in. It's everything. You can't let anything out until then you can like take a breath and you're like, oh my gosh, but if I can feel all this and I can get all this, I've been calling it venom, because I think if you can get stuff out, then you can be free. If you keep it locked in, for all of us, including myself, it doesn't serve you, and going out into the world, it doesn't make anything more beautiful.
No, venom. It's a good. And my therapist used to say to me, and I quote her all the time, every feeling fully felt passes. So the feeling is releasing the venom in some ways that you're describing. It is those feelings that we stuff and contain and box up and shove in the recesses that often come out sideways, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So you described earlier in this conversation about the fact that you and your husband had a locked horn moment in terms of, if you're not going to act, I'm going to act. I can imagine, and do know, because I know you, that your marriage also went through its own entropy or destruction, and then recovery as well. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we were polarized as parents, and we were polarized in many ways right from the beginning. I was more of a free spirit, less is more, but yet on the discipline side, and anything with drugs and alcohol, I was absolutely on it. Mm-hmm. So we had very different styles, and because of that, we each were in separate corners of our house. And so I think it was a very difficult style for kids to know, well, which is it? Is it laid back and free and no sports and go to Maine and forget the tournament? Or is it discipline and hard work, all of which is amazing and serves you well? But how do you bridge those two ideas that create this big hole in the middle? Mm-hmm. So the answer is a lot of work. We had a lot of counseling. We had a ton of support. There were a lot of tears. There was a lot of anger. We had the HYDE school, which I attribute a lot of my growth to. And we had a deep love.
Yeah. You had the essential ingredient, love. Yeah. I loved hearing when you and your husband got back together. It was like, it wasn't going to defeat the two of you ultimately, right?
Well, we couldn't let it, because there were these 4 children, and their eyes were like, kind of like zipping around like little fireflies in the night, right? like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And, you know, we were still saying to each other, what are we going to do? And yet we had enough. Well, it wasn't even enough. We had a high respect for each other, even though we weren't aligned in our ideas.
So it didn't get ugly, is what you're saying.
It got ugly. It got really ugly. Let me be honest.
Well, actually, it just makes you more human. I'm glad to hear it.
I can't lie. I can't lie about it. It got so ugly that I felt like, how can honestly this be happening? And the answer is because we're all human and it's life. And I would never be sitting here brave enough and honest enough to have this conversation had I not gone through what I went through. That's the truth.
So before we open it up for questions, I want to quote my favorite quote, which is perfectly aligned with this conversation. And anytime I have the opportunity to use this quote, I do. It's Desmond Tutu's quote: "Pain and struggle are the anvil upon which our children's character is forged, where they learn compassion and empathy."
Oh my God. I'm going to write that down and keep that next to me always.
So it's in a book called God Has a Dream. It's in there by Desmond. Okay. Yeah. But it's perfect for your daughters. They're learning their strength in part from the difficulties in your family.
That is exactly right.
Yeah. All right, Brandy, do we have questions?
We do not have questions from the audience yet, but we can open up the floor, and I can kick us off with the first question.
Good.
So you did a lot of work and you went through a lot. What advice would you give to other parents who may be struggling with a kid who is struggling with addiction, and who may not know where to even start with helping their child?
Well, it's kind of the ultimate question, right? I guess my guttural response would be to reach out and find resources within schools, within anybody, within, I guess, just start asking questions and be honest, and there will be resources that will kind of appear. That's what I did.
That's really good advice, because we have a tendency in our culture, what goes on in our four walls is our business, and it is nobody. That's our, sort of Calvinistic, we live in little groups instead.
Right.
That's our culture. And, or for many of us anyway, and to be able to say, yeah, what's going on inside my four walls right now isn't pretty. Mm-hmm. And it isn't easy. And I need help because I can't come up with the solution.
Right.
It's probably the most powerful opener you can make to change.
Right. Exactly right.
Don't have the answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. No other questions for today. I am going to say thank you, Debbie. Thank you. What a wonderful conversation. Really appreciate it.
It was an honor, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you.